You're checking your phone again. Not for news, not for emails. For one specific person who, technically, you're not even dating. They didn't ghost you. They didn't commit to you. They just exist in this undefined space between something and nothing. And here's what nobody tells you. That ambiguity, it doesn't just mess with your head. It's doing something measurable to your nervous system right now.
Psychology and neuroscience now have a name for this kind of relationship. And more importantly, they have an explanation for why it feels the way it does. In the next 19 minutes, we're going to trace exactly what happens inside your brain and body when a relationship has no definition. From your cortisol levels to your dopamine system to something called your social engagement circuitry. We're going to break down the biology of romantic ambiguity.
So first, what even is a situationship? In 2024, researchers at Springer's Sexuality and Culture journal formally codified the definition: a relationship characterized by stable ambiguity. Not a casual hookup, not a committed partnership, something in between, with the emotional intimacy of a relationship, but none of the clarity. You spend time together, you share things, you may be physically intimate, but the question, what are we, leaves permanently unanswered.
And here's the thing about that permanently unanswered question. Your brain hates it. The human nervous system evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to resolve uncertainty, especially social uncertainty. Because for our ancestors, not knowing where you stood with the people around you could literally mean death.
So when the question stays open, your brain doesn't shrug it off. It treats it as a threat. But this particular kind of threat, the romantic ambiguity of the modern age, is brand new, and our nervous systems were not built for it.
Let's start with the science. Psychologist Leanne Knobloch developed what's called relational uncertainty theory, later expanded into relational turbulence theory, to explain what happens cognitively when a relationship has no definition. She identified 3 distinct types of uncertainty that a person in a situationship simultaneously experiences. Self-uncertainty. What do I actually want from this? Partner uncertainty. What do they want from me? And relationship uncertainty. What even is this?
3 open questions, all running at the same time. And here's where it gets physical. When you hold that much unresolved ambiguity, your brain's conflict monitor, a structure called the anterior cingulate cortex, treats it like an unfinished task it cannot close. Think of it like having 30 browser tabs open that you can't quite exit. The system keeps trying to resolve them all day, while you're in a meeting, while you're trying to sleep. That's not a metaphor. That's the mechanism. And it has measurable hormonal consequences.
A landmark study published on PubMed found that high levels of partner uncertainty are directly linked to heightened cortisol reactivity during stressful interactions. And critically, they impede physiological recovery even after a supportive conversation. Your body can't come down from the stress response, not fully, not while the question stays open.
Over time, that sustained elevation becomes something researchers call allostatic load, the cumulative wear and tear on your body from chronic stress. It shows up in your immune function, your sleep, your cardiovascular system.
all because one question never got answered.
But here's where it goes deeper. Because we haven't even talked about what happens when the thing you're afraid of, losing them, actually starts to feel like it's happening. When the text doesn't come. When they seem distant. When you feel that pang in your chest that you can't quite describe to anyone because, technically, you're not even in a relationship. In 2003, neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger and her team at UCLA published a now famous study in the journal Science. They put participants in a brain scanner and had them play a simple online ball tossing game, and then systematically excluded them from the game. What they found changed how we understand emotional pain. Social exclusion activated the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula, the exact same brain regions involved in the distressing component of physical pain.
When you say a relationship hurts, neurologically, your brain agrees with you. Now, it's important to note that more recent research has added important nuance here. Scientists using a technique called Multivariate Pattern Analysis, or MVPA, found that while the same brain regions activate, the specific neural firing patterns for social and physical pain are distinct. The brain uses the same neighborhood, but different houses.
So what does this mean for the person in a situationship? It means the pain is real. It just has its own unique neural signature. And the particularly cruel part? A clear rejection at least gives the brain a signal it can process. It can grieve. It can move on. But a situationship? The signal never comes. The pain circuit stays activated, waiting for a resolution that doesn't arrive.
Here's the paradox. Here's the thing that sounds wrong until the moment you feel it making complete sense. Situationships are often harder to leave than committed relationships. Not because the connection is deeper, but because of a neurological mechanism that has nothing to do with love.
In the 1950s, behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner discovered something that would later explain everything from gambling addictions to toxic relationships: variable ratio reinforcement schedules. What he found was this: unpredictable rewards produce the most compulsive, the most extinction-resistant, the most addictive behaviors of any reward pattern. Not consistent rewards, unpredictable ones.
In a situationship, the affection, attention, and warmth are delivered on a variable schedule. Hot, cold, warm, gone, hot again. And your brain's dopamine system doesn't spike when the reward arrives. It spikes hardest in the anxious moments before a potential reward, during the uncertainty itself. The maybe is the drug. That text after 3 days of silence? Neurochemically, it hits harder than a consistent daily message ever could.
This creates what psychologists call a trauma bonding loop. The person who is the source of your anxiety becomes the only person who can relieve it. The connection feels profound, intense, like a soulmate. But what you're actually addicted to is the cycle of relief that follows the fear. This isn't weakness. This is your brain doing exactly what brains do.
Let me describe something to you, and I want you to notice if you recognize yourself. You're with them. Everything feels good. And then, something shifts. A slight change in tone. a message that takes longer than usual, a moment where they seem far away, even when they're right next to you. And in that split second, something happens in your body before your mind has even finished processing the cue. Your heart rate increases. Your chest tightens. A wave of cortisol floods your system. You're not being dramatic. Your amygdala just triggered. The amygdala is your brain's primitive threat detector, and in the context of an insecure attachment, it is constantly on watch.
When it detects even the faintest signal of potential abandonment, it fires off an alarm that reaches the rest of your body in milliseconds, faster than the rational, regulating part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, can even weigh in. And here's the trap that chronic situationship stress creates. Repeated stress weakens the functional connection between your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala. The braking system gets worn down, which means the rational part of you, the part that says, "I'm probably overthinking this," becomes progressively less able to override the alarm. You know you're overreacting. You can see it happening, and you still can't stop it. That's not a character flaw. That's neurological impairment from chronic relational stress. And it produces a state that researchers call hypervigilance, an exhausting, depleting state where your nervous system is perpetually scanning for danger, reading every pause, every ellipsis, every slight change in their energy, treating ambiguous signals as potential threats. Because to your nervous system, they are. Neuroscientist Stephen Porges developed a framework called Polyvagal Theory to explain how our autonomic nervous system governs social connection. Now, to be transparent with you, some of the specific biological details of this theory are actively debated by neuroscientists. But the functional model it describes aligns with what the broader research shows, and it helps explain something that's hard to articulate: why being in a situationship can feel simultaneously lonely and overwhelming, and why real connection feels so out of reach. The theory proposes that our nervous system is constantly running a subconscious scan called neuroception, reading cues in the environment and the people around us to determine, am I safe here? When those cues say yes, safe, warmth, consistency, eye contact, a reliable presence, the nervous system enters what Porges calls the social engagement state, the part of you that can be open, connected, present. This is where real intimacy happens. But when the cues are mixed, warm today, cold tomorrow, available then distant, the neuroceptive scan can't settle. It keeps flagging a potential threat. And a nervous system that can't settle into safety doesn't go into social engagement mode. It goes into defense mode. Sympathetic activation, the anxious, hypervigilant state. Or worse, a kind of dorsal shutdown, numbness, disconnection, the hollow feeling of going through the motions. This is why you can be with someone and still feel profoundly alone. This is why the "I can't explain it" feeling isn't a mystery. It's your nervous system telling you as clearly as it can, I cannot find safety here. So, what do you actually do with this? Because understanding the neuroscience is powerful, but it's not the same as healing. And here's the first thing to understand about recovery. It's not primarily a thinking problem.
it's a nervous system problem, which means willpower alone, I'm just going to decide to feel better, is not the mechanism. The mechanism is nervous system regulation.
Let me give you 3 evidence-based principles. First, break the intermittent reinforcement cycle by removing the variable rewards. The dopamine loop cannot reset if the lever is still available. This doesn't mean you have to hate the person. It means your brain needs a period without the next potential hit, whether that's no contact, unfollowing, or intentionally limiting access. This is the hardest step. It's also the most important one for letting the dopamine system recalibrate.
Second, restore predictability to your nervous system. In a situationship, your system was trained to live in chaos. Rebuilding a sense of internal safety means creating structure that is reliable. Consistent sleep, movement, meals, time with people who don't make you guess. Not as a self-improvement project, as a nervous system intervention. Your body needs to relearn what stability feels like.
Third, address the cognitive layer through therapy or structured practice. Cognitive behavioral therapy has strong evidence for breaking the rumination loops that a situationship activates. And mindfulness practices, specifically the skill of observing a thought without fusing with it, can interrupt the catastrophizing spiral that hypervigilance creates.
This isn't about thinking positively. It's about learning to unhook from thoughts that your nervous system has coded as survival information. And this is not about being broken. It's about being human. Your nervous system did exactly what it was designed to do. It attached, it sought safety, it fought hard to protect you. It just did so in a context that gave it no solid ground. I want to reframe something for you before we close, because there's a story many people tell themselves after a situationship. And the story goes like this. I should have known better. I was too much. I got too attached. I wanted more than they could give. Here's what the science actually says. What you called confusion was your nervous system processing a genuine, sustained threat. What you called being too much was your attachment system doing exactly what it was designed to do, seeking a safe, reliable, consistent bond.
Because that's what the human attachment system needs, not a label. Safety, consistency, predictability. What you called weakness, the checking, the hypervigilance, the inability to just stop caring, was your prefrontal cortex trying to regulate a nervous system that was being kept in a state of chronic alarm.
The fact that it hurts so much is evidence of your capacity for real connection, not evidence of your brokenness. And the fact that you couldn't just leave is evidence of how powerful the neurochemical mechanisms we've talked about today actually are. You weren't weak. You were neurobiologically in a system designed to create exactly that kind of pull. Remember the question from the beginning? Why does something that was never officially real feel like it's rewiring your brain? Here's the answer. Because to your nervous system, it was real. The attachment system doesn't check relationship status. It responds to intimacy, to hope, to the neurochemical signature of a bond it was building. Your brain doesn't know the difference between "we're official" and "we never defined this." It just knows that something felt important, and that something remained unresolved. The pain isn't a misunderstanding. It's confirmation that you connected. The goal now is not to undo what you felt. It's to give your nervous system what it was looking for all along: solid ground. Before you go, sit with this question for a moment. What would it feel like to be in a relationship where your nervous system could actually rest? Not perform, not scan, not wait, just rest. That's not too much to want. That's the most human thing there is.
If this resonated with you, share it with someone who's in their own undefined chapter right now. And if you want to keep exploring the science of human psychology, subscribe to the channel and like the video. We decode the human brain every week. I'll see you in the next one.